Hello everyone, my name is Aaron and this is the Game Day Hour. Welcome back to another episode of the Game Day Hour, and in this episode we are doing something I've been looking forward to for a long time, and that is predicting the NFL playoffs from the wild card round all the way to the Super Bowl. Now, I don't know what you guys think. I don't know what you guys would have as your Super Bowl. So, in the comments below, I want you to tell me who you think is going to be in the Super Bowl. But without further ado, I'm going to be going from game to game, wildcard, divisional round, conference championship, all the way to the Super Bowl. And at the end of today's episode, we're going to be answering a couple of questions. So yeah, I hope you guys are excited. Let's do this. This is predicting the 2023 and 24 NFL playoffs. So the first game we're going to be looking at is the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans 5 versus 4. The Cleveland Browns have had an excellent story to tell. First of all, this is not a franchise that's used to seeing the postseason, but they made it with 4 different quarterbacks, starting with Deshaun Watson, and right now working with Joe Flacco, who is like 38 years old and was coming off his couch, and all of a sudden he's leading the Browns to the postseason. And he's versus a rookie in CJ Stroud, one of the best quarterbacks all year long, not just for rookies, but every single quarterback, and my rookie of the year player. So both these teams had no expectations. Cleveland Browns had a little bit more, but that's because they had Watson and they had Chubb and Amari Cooper. The first two got injured, so they were done for the year. Cleveland survives with Joe Flacco, with Jerome Ford, and they're getting back Amari Cooper. So you got to be happy for these guys. They did one heck of a job, and Houston as well. I mean, again, with Stroud and this young core, I had no expectations for the Texans. I said they'd finish with like 3 or 4 wins, and they make the playoffs. But for my pick, I have to go with Cleveland because last time they played, Cleveland wiped the floor with Houston. So I expect the same thing. I think Joe Flacco will win and will most likely play his former team in the playoffs. What a story that is. Another great storyline for the playoffs is number 6 Miami at number 3 Kansas City. Tyreek Hill's return to Arrowhead. So Miami is like the Dallas Cowboys, and you know me, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. Great against every team that is not over 500, which makes me a little nervous for the playoffs, but I'm going to be a little bit calm about it. Miami's only win over a 500 team was the Dallas Cowboys, but other than that, I mean, they have played atrocious and a terrible end to the year. Buffalo beat them and jumps them as the AFC East champs, and now they have to go all the way to Arrowhead to play the most underwhelming Patrick Mahomes-led Kansas City Chiefs team. I mean, the receiving core for the Chiefs, one of the worst I've ever seen in my entire life. They drop almost everything and make so many poor decisions. But Miami, against good teams, they're not that great. And if I'm not mistaken, it's supposed to be around 3 degrees at Arrowhead. Miami could have been in the warmth of Miami. Instead, they're going to an extremely cold place in Kansas City. This is going to play a big factor. I think Tyreek Hill will go off, but I think Miami will fall to Kansas City. However, expect a potential upset because of the receiving core being so bad for Kansas City, but I still have the Chiefs moving on to win, and will most likely play whoever's number 2. We'll get to that right now, as the number 7 Pittsburgh Steelers, who just snuck into the playoffs, are playing the number 2 Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills started the year off bad. They were 6-6 at one point, but then they won their last 5, jumped Miami, and now they're going to potentially host 2 playoff games. This is the one game where I'm completely sure about my pick, and that is Buffalo, because As much as I'm happy for Pittsburgh, they really should not be here. I mean, they got pretty lucky to get in. Their team is just cruising, but they're not outstanding. This is not a team I would see making the Super Bowl. As a matter of fact, if I had to give odds, this is the team with the worst odds to make the Super Bowl, in my opinion. So Buffalo wins easy in front of their home crowd. Pittsburgh, bye-bye. Now we're moving on to the NFC again. We're going with 5 and 4. The Philadelphia Eagles versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What happened, Philadelphia? I mean, you guys looked awful at the end of the stretch. 6 losses on the year. Lost your last 5 out of 6. Gets destroyed by San Francisco. Gets blown out by Dallas. They lose to Seattle barely, but with a backup quarterback, no Geno Smith. You win barely against the Giants, and then you lose to a 3-12 Arizona Cardinals team. The Cowboys also lost to them, but you still lost in a pivotal moment, and then get blown out by the New York Giants. So they are just absolutely, like, what's the terminology I want to use here? They're almost crawling their way into the playoffs, missing out on a home game, and now they have to play nearly every game on the road potentially. And now with Tampa Bay, 3 years in a row making the postseason as the winners of the NFC South. Congratulations to them. They didn't look that outstanding, and these two teams played already this year, and the Eagles won, but that was when the Eagles were actually playing good. I'm going to take the Buccaneers to win. It's probably going to be Philadelphia, but when you see how they made their way into the playoffs, potentially losing A.J. Brown for the game, I mean, this Buccaneers team looks better than a lot of people give them credit for. I'm going to go with the Buccaneers to beat the Eagles. And then another good storyline, the Rams, number 6, versus the Lions, who are number 3. Matthew Stafford's return to Detroit, and Jared Goff playing against his former team, the Rams. If you remember, in 2021, Stafford and Goff were traded from the Rams to the Lions and vice versa. So you got to give it to both these guys making the postseason. Obviously, Stafford has a Super Bowl. But Jared Goff and the Lions this year, they look incredible. And I said in my previous episode on a Q&A that I have them as the 3rd best odds to make the Super Bowl out of the NFC. So I'm going to keep with that regard and pick the Lions to win. But this is going to be a very close matchup. It can potentially go with the LA Rams. And as a Dallas Cowboy fan, I'd want that to happen. But I think it's going to be the Lions that move on. And the last game is the number 7 Green Bay Packers versus the number 2 and my personal favorite Dallas Cowboys. Now, let's be honest, the Dallas Cowboys don't look as great as they do in their matchups. I mean, when you play against teams over 500, you have a losing record. That's not very good. The defense is inconsistent. The Cowboys defense can be inconsistent. They're a great defense. It's just, in sometimes big games, they're not good against the run, and they can get killed in the pass game from time to time. But the offense of the Dallas Cowboys is a different story. Dak Prescott had an MVP-like season. He's not going to win the MVP. It's going to be Lamar Jackson. But you got to give credit where credit is due. Dak Prescott had the most touchdowns passed this year and only 9 interceptions. He played amazing and a big turnaround from last season. With the Packers, though, I'm very, very impressed with Jordan Love. And the run game with Aaron Jones is going to be effective. However, that Packers defense outside of Jair Alexander is going to have some problems. The Dallas Cowboys should, and I think they will, win this game. It's going to be closer than 7.5, in which Vegas is giving Dallas right now, but I don't expect the Packers to win. And they do, they'll break my heart and also make me very, very upset with the Cowboys going forward. But give me Dallas, and they'll be able to host another playoff game. As a matter of fact, they're undefeated at home. So I have to go with Dallas on this one. With Cleveland's win, they will play the Baltimore Ravens, the Browns versus the Ravens, and get this, another big storyline. Joe Flacco plays against his former team, the Baltimore Ravens. That's going to be pretty funny to see it, but if there's any team that has a chance at beating the Ravens, it will be the Cleveland Browns. But But I said the Ravens are the tougher team, and they are the better team overall. Their defense is insane. I'm going to give it to the Ravens to win. They're at home, and Lamar Jackson's having an MVP season. But if there's any team that's going to beat the Ravens before the Super Bowl, it will be Cleveland. But give me Baltimore to win overall. I just think that at some point the magic's going to die out for Cleveland, and it will be against the Ravens. So give me Baltimore. And then finally, a different type of matchup. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, first ever road playoff game against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. These teams have seen each other in the playoffs, but it's always been played at Arrowhead. Now it's going to be played in Buffalo, and it's going to be pretty intense. I think that if there's any team that matches up with the Chiefs nicely, it is the Buffalo Bills. But obviously, we already know how I feel about the Chiefs in that receiving core, and you expect that to be a good thing at Buffalo with another great receiving core that Josh Allen has with Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. You already know that the Chiefs at some point are going to be stumped if they can't get their act together, and I don't think they will, and it will cost them against Buffalo. Give me the Bills to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Buffalo. Now moving over to the NFC, we have the number 4 Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the number 1 San Francisco 49ers. Now, if you heard me on TikTok throughout the year, I've probably hinted that I already have my Super Bowl matchup for the most part set in the NFC. I believe that the Niners will roll over Tampa Bay, and they already did once this year. I expect them to do it again. I have the Niners winning, and I don't think anybody else would disagree with this matchup. I mean, when you look at the 49ers offense and how complete it is, and then you look at their defense to see just how complete they are there too, there's not really many flaws. The only flaw, potentially, is Brock Purdy. And that's a stretch because Purdy was one of the best quarterbacks all year long, but you can see what happens when he is hit with problems. He doesn't do that well. I mean, look at the Cleveland Browns game. He almost won that one, but missed field goal. Minnesota, he was terrible. Cincinnati, he wasn't that better. And then, of course, against Baltimore, terrible. 4 interceptions. So if he has one of those games, the Niners could struggle. But if the Niners have a good day, which I think they will, they'll absolutely roll over Tampa Bay, no problems. And then the last one is number 3 Detroit at number 2 Dallas. Everybody's been talking about Dallas for years. They can't get to the NFC Championship ever since winning the Super Bowl in '96. It's true, we have not. As for the Lions, their first time hosting a playoff game in 30 years. And they'll be the first time winning against the Rams. Even though these two teams played and it ended very controversially, I believe that because it's in Dallas and the Dallas have been incredible at home, the Cowboys will finally break that streak and make the NFC Championship. It's going to be tough because the Lions are a very aggressive team, and if you're not ready for their aggression, well then you're going to have problems. But I think Dallas, after seeing them the first time, will adjust, and the Cowboys will win in a more better fashion than they did last time. I have the Cowboys beating the Lions in this case. And now we have the AFC Championship. Number 2 Buffalo making their way to Maryland to play the number 1 Baltimore Ravens. So I've been talking about Buffalo like they're this type of juggernaut because they are. I've watched them personally and they torched Dallas. I mean, absolutely torched them on the ground, in the air. Kind of. Not really in the air, but more on the ground. But we're talking about playing against potentially the best defense in all of football, and that's the Ravens. And there's one thing that Josh Allen has had troubles with all year long. It's where he's been throwing the ball. He has the second most interceptions among any quarterback in the NFL, just below Sam Howell. So I expect that Josh Allen is going to basically be in his own way, is going to give the Ravens a lot of looks, and unfortunately he's going to have some interceptions, poor play. The Ravens will capitalize. The Ravens will go to the Super Bowl this year. Because I said Cleveland has the best shot. I don't think Buffalo has the best shot. It would be Cleveland. But I said the Ravens would beat the Browns. Therefore, the Ravens will beat the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship and move on to Super Bowl 58. And as for the other side, round 3. Wild card, divisional round, now the NFC Championship between the number 2 Dallas Cowboys and the number 1 San Francisco 49ers, one of the greatest postseason rivalries among any sport in the entire world. I'm hoping for a third time's a charm, but if I'm being objective, the Cowboys do not have an answer for the 49ers when the Niners are fully healthy, and I'm pretty sure the Niners are fully healthy. So at the end of the day, as much as it'll pain me to see that, it will be the 49ers that move on to the Super Bowl. I said there's nobody in the NFC that is going to even touch the 49ers. So unfortunately, my boys will play hard, but they will not beat the Niners. Now, if they do, hallelujah, but I don't see it happening. I think that the 49ers will be going to the Super Bowl this year. They just have one of the most complete teams in all of football. And it leads to this, the Super Bowl. About 11 years ago, I watched one of the craziest Super Bowls I've ever seen between the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers. The Ravens at the time were led by Joe Flacco. The Niners at the time were led by Colin Kaepernick. And it was the Harbaugh Coaching Bowl. The Ravens jumped out to a 28-6 lead after a kickoff return for a touchdown right out of halftime. But then the lights turned off at New Orleans Stadium, and the Niners stormed back and were just this close to winning against Baltimore. What ultimately happened is that the Ravens won the Super Bowl, their second in franchise history. Now, 11 years later, they meet again, but with different faces. Still same coach for the Ravens, but different for the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan. Brock Purdy versus Lamar Jackson, round 2. The Ravens and the Niners already played this year on a Monday night, and the Ravens stomped the 49ers. I don't know what Brock Purdy was doing at the time. I mean, that was the best defense he's ever played at that point in time. I mean, 4 interceptions, that's pretty bad. But this game will be much closer. However, I'm going to have to say, I was going to say the Niners at the beginning of the year were my Super Bowl candidates to win. But I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens because that defense is super dominant. I think that they will be the difference maker. And even though the game's going to be much closer, expect the 49ers to not get it done against the Ravens. It will be tough because the Niners are my second favorite team. But I mean, the Ravens are just that great. And if Lamar Jackson, he's on a mission. And you can see it in his eyes when he plays. He's on a mission. And I think he'll secure that Super Bowl for the Ravens, which would be the 3rd in their franchise history. But if that game happens, which that's what I'm predicting, it's going to be a bloodbath and one of the more entertaining Super Bowls of all time. So, yeah, I have the Ravens winning the Super Bowl. Niners is second place, obviously. And, yeah, that is my predictions. And I hope you enjoyed those predictions. Now, let's get on to the Q&A before we get out of here. Now, I only got questions from my friend Daniel. He sent me 2 questions. He said, your projection of the first round fantasy picks next year, so who he thinks I'm going to see be taken off in the first round. So, I haven't had a full look at fantasy, but I'm going to throw a few names out there. McCaffrey is definitely a first round pick. There's no questions about that. Tyreek Hill is undoubtedly going to be a first round pick. Justin Jefferson is going to be a first round pick. CeeDee Lamb, after the season he put up, is going to be a first round pick. There was only 2 receivers this year that had 1,700 plus yards. That was Hill and that was Lamb. Those guys were amazing. And I had CeeDee Lamb. He was my MVP this year. We'll get more into that when the season ends, about wrapping up my fantasy season. I already told you about the games. I'll tell you a little bit more about the players when we get to it. We'll do a little tier list, so be prepared for that. Let's see what else. Who else is going to be there? You're going to have a quarterback. If Mahomes doesn't get a wide receiver, I wouldn't put him as a first round pick. I would more likely see someone like Josh Allen getting the first round nod, maybe Lamar Jackson. What other running backs would I put in there? Do you put Nick Chubb back in there? I don't know. Derrick Henry, more likely he'll be a first-round pick. Jonathan Taylor is probably going to be a first-round pick, assuming he stays with the Colts. Man, who else? Jamar Chase will probably be a first-round pick. Nick Chubb potentially, though he's going to be a little iffy because of that injury. And then, are there any other guys? Yeah, that's probably it. I probably just told you 11 guys. That's who I have as my first round's picks. I don't know who I'm going to get because I'm going to be the last overall pick, so we'll see. But I never get a quarterback in the first round. That's just kind of how I am. And he asked the second question. He said, who's your favorite football player of all time? Favorite football player of all time? That's a tough one. I'm just going to go by players I've seen play personally. My favorite quarterback I've ever seen played all time was Peyton Manning. Favorite running back of all time? I mean, as much as he's a bust now and is not a great player, I really loved watching Ezekiel Elliott in his early years with the Cowboys. He was probably my favorite running back of all time ever watching. I never got to watch the big dogs like Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, obviously. Favorite wide receiver? It's probably going to be either Dez Bryant or Julio Jones, one of those two. For a while, it was Antonio Brown before, you know, all the stuff started happening. I'll probably give the nod to Dez Bryant. And then favorite defender of all time? I'll probably have to go with Ray Lewis. Those are like my favorite players of all time as far as who I've seen. I probably would like to do a video where I dive deeper into that. So thank you for that. And yeah, those are all the Q&A questions. Again, if you want to see your question answered on one of my podcast episodes, just send it via any of the social medias I have. They'll obviously be in the links below. And yeah, thank you for the questions. And thank you for watching this episode. I hope these playoffs are amazing. I hope the Cowboys win the Super Bowl, but obviously that's going to be a tough stretch. We'll see. But yeah, that'll be it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and if you do, please leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe. Go follow me on all my social medias, especially TikTok. I like to post there, and I like to interact with people there. Go watch my previous episode. It was about my fantasy football. If you haven't seen it already, go check it out. And keep a lookout on TikTok for when I ask for Q&A questions. You don't have to just do sports questions. You can do other questions as long as they're not controversial like politics, okay? That's really my only regards. Don't ask me anything about political stuff. I really don't care about that stuff much. I think it's all a waste of time at this point. And yeah, that'll be it. So hope you guys have a great day. Take care. Enjoy your time in the playoffs. Hopefully your team is successful throughout the playoffs. Maybe even wins the Super Bowl. And I will see you all in the next one. Peace out.